I'm a professional makeup artist, and in this video I'm going to do a full face makeup application as you see here, using techniques I learned as a makeup artist. My primary focus for this video is an everyday makeup look that is very fresh and natural, light but flawless base makeup, face shaping and blush, applying eyeshadow according to your face shape, and more. If you're intrigued by this kind of content, please subscribe, you might learn something new. And let's get on with the makeup tutorial. Starting off with the Benefit Professional Primer. This is one of the most common primers and effective as well. This is pore filling and line smoothing, so your foundation will appear a lot more seamless and less texturized. If you have more of a drier skin, you can use a moisturizer or a hydrating primer. Those are very different from the pore filling primers that have silicone in them. The one I like to use for this purpose is the Tarte Base Tape Primer. This is hydrating and also has a little bit of a tack to it, so foundation can grip on really well. For foundation, I like to use the Sigma F80 Flat Kabuki brush. You can find similar ones at Amazon as well. I have multiples of them, but it is important that you start with a clean foundation brush because it can cause breakouts if you don't clean it and use it repeatedly, because bacteria and mold tends to start accumulating in there. I use this brush cleaner, but also you can find other brush cleaners as well, or you can use alcohol, which I sometimes use, but alcohol is not the best for brushes in the long term because it dries out the bristles and they don't perform as well. Let's start with the foundation. I don't usually recommend luxury beauty products here on my channel because some of them are just overpriced and charging for the name. But the one thing that I would recommend from luxury beauty is foundations, which I think luxury beauty does the best. These are a few of the ones that I highly recommend. The Gucci foundation, if you want a really matte finish. The YSL All Hours foundation for an airbrushed finish. Very Valentino for a natural finish. Not overly matte, but not overly dewy either. The Guerlain, again, for a flawless airbrushed finish. Also the Tom Ford Traceless Soft Matte. This one is the most natural looking foundation I've seen, hence I think the word traceless. And it says soft matte, but I think it's more of a natural finish, not completely matte. The most matte foundation out of the ones I showed is the Gucci. I think this would be good for oily skin. All of these are medium coverage, and I do recommend a medium coverage. Personally, it looks good on everyone. It's easier to control and build your desired level of coverage, whereas light coverage foundations to me don't really cover the blemishes and the dark circles that you're trying to conceal, and full coverage just looks too artificial. So as a makeup artist, I recommend going medium coverage for your day-to-day makeup. Before putting on foundation, I recommend concealing and correcting beforehand. This is a step I tend to overlook if I have a foundation with a reasonable amount of coverage. But for today, I want to do a full face. I have here with me the Sigma Spectrum Color Correcting Duo, and this does a simple and good job of concealing the darkness under the eyes. So the darkness has tones that are opposite to the peachy tones here, and hence it cancels out when you apply this. Already you can see a difference, even though it's not very full coverage like a concealer. You can see that some of those gray tones have been canceled out. So this has two shades. There's a lighter shade that I just used. If you have a slightly deeper skin tone, this one would be the better one. There are many other options out there for skin tones that are even deeper. For them, this probably won't work. The more you move towards a deeper skin tone, the appropriate color to correct with would be more of an orange. The Too Faced Born This Way Multi-Use Sculpting Concealer is my most used concealer in my collection. And this is a high coverage, creamy concealer, and you only need a little. So use as little as possible. With complexion, less is more. So don't overdo the concealer, don't overdo the foundation if you want a more natural finish. I like to use my finger in tapping motions, but a good concealer brush will also do the trick. However, applying too much product, especially under the eyes, would make them heavy and will crease, and that's not what we want with our base makeup, especially for mature skin. For spot concealing, use a concealer that is as close to your skin tone as possible. But for under the eyes, going a shade or two lighter is going to help conceal that darkness. Another concealer that I like using under the eyes is the Pat McGrath Labs concealer. I typically use this, especially when I don't use color corrector on a daily basis. This is the amount that I use. A little goes a long way, and it's very smooth under the eyes. I use my finger with the tapping motion because it lets me get close to the eye and the lash line. With a brush, I would be unable to do that very precisely. And you want concealer only on the areas that you need. If you overdo it, it does tend to crease a little, it's more creamy, and the coverage makes it look a little more artificial as well. So if you make those big triangles that influencers used to make under the eyes, it will not look natural, and that's not what we're going for today. So I'm going to use the Tom Ford foundation because I want a more natural looking finish today. I've already concealed and color corrected the areas that I wanted, and now it will ensure that when my foundation goes on top, there is no imperfections that the foundation needs to cover, because it is, after all, a medium coverage and some of your skin will show through. I used 2 pumps. This has a very liquid consistency, which means it will be easier to apply. I'm going to use my finger to place some of this on the face before I go in and blend it, because with this kind of consistency, the brush will soak up a lot of product, which is not necessarily ideal. Now you gently tap this on till you get an even application. Make sure to blend it into your neck. Shade selection for your foundations can be quite a hassle, and it's hard to select the right shade. So I will do another separate video on this, and if you're interested, make sure to subscribe and have the notification bell on because it will be coming soon. Because of the studio lights that I have, the foundation looks a little lighter than it actually is. And also because I'm retaining a little bit of a tan. When I actually purchased this foundation, it was my exact shade, which is saying something because I ordered it online. I did, however, spend a lot of time contemplating what was my right shade. So it will definitely help when I share some of my tips and tricks to select the right foundation shade. A lot of people I see online don't use the foundation on this area, but whatever leftover foundation I have in the end, I use on the eye area as well, gently, because we don't need too much foundation in that area, but we also don't need it to be bare, because if we're doing a more natural look, the shade difference will show, and that does not look natural. While you're doing the rest of your makeup, it's nice to pop on just a little bit of either lip oil or lip treatment so that your lips can be nice and moisturized when you're finally ready to put on the lipstick, which will then go on a lot smoother, or a lip plumper if you prefer one. This is when I like to do my eyebrows. So I don't do a lot of manipulating with my eyebrows. I like to keep them a little bit more simple, especially when I'm going out the door and I'm not doing a full glam makeup look. So what I do is I used a brow pencil in my shade. You can use essentially any brow pencil. This one is called Billion Dollar Brows. Make sure it has a very fine point and you draw in hair-like strokes. Hair-like strokes are the way to go. Of course, if we're looking to be a little bit more natural. Also, I was never into those very sculpted brows that were popular a few years back, or even the brows that stood up or were overly hairy or bushy. You can clean them up for a more defined look, but for now, I prefer my brows in a more natural kind of way. The next step for me is to make sure my brows stay in place, and this is by using a brow gel. Brow gels can give your brows some hold and definition. You sweep the brow gel in the direction of the hair growth and it gives it a more defined look. And the brows stay in place where you lock them. The one I'm using here is from Patrick Ta Beauty, but there are others that might work just as good. This one has more of a strong hold, but I'm sure there are others that do the same job. Now that the brows are somewhat defined yet natural, let's move on to some eyeshadow. So this is where I would apply a powder to the full face. If that were not the case, I would first apply cream products like cream bronzer or a cream blush, and then apply the powder last. I normally don't use powders because my skin is more on the dry side, so I only have a couple of pressed powder options, if you will. This one is Brighten Up from Essence, and this one is the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Finish. Going to use a large dense brush from Sigma because I don't want the powder to be too concentrated in one place. So this half I'm going to use the Essence one just to compare. Cleaned my brush in between, and on this side let's do the Charlotte Tilbury one. Honestly, I prefer the Essence side because it brightened things up a little. Yep, I prefer this side. Let's start with bronzer. So I have a couple of favorites. I like the Sigma bronzer. The Pat McGrath one is quite good. The Give Beauty bronzer duos are quite nice. They have been appearing at Winners or TJ Maxx, the US equivalent, so that's quite good. You can get a good deal on these and they're excellent quality, and you get two options. For today, however, I am going to use the Sigma. As a makeup artist, I like to use my bronzer for sculpting as well. I don't apply it all over my face in a non-defined way. It's more on spots that I want to sculpt and contour, because contours are very gray leaning or cool toned, and in real life it doesn't look that flattering for most skin tones. Since I have more of a neutral undertone, contouring with a bronzer is the way to go for me. First, I like to define the hollows of my cheeks. The rule of thumb is to not go lower than the edge of your nose. And stay just below the cheekbone. However, since this is bronzer and not contour, I'm not usually this precise with it. However, as you can see the difference, it does give a bit of a sculpt. When contouring, this gives the appearance of more defined cheekbones. Also, when contouring, makeup artists like to contour towards an oval face shape. So if you have a different face shape, this might mean creating shadows on areas of the face where you want them to be more defined. If I'm contouring with bronzer, I would place more bronzer here to make sure that my jaws look slimmer and my face shape overall looks more oval. Apparently, oval is the ideal face shape, and that's why makeup artists contour or bronze towards it. Contour slash bronzer is a good way to define your jawline and chin. If you use a deeper shade under the chin to mimic that shadow, you can also mimic the appearance of a more lean under chin area. For foreheads that are a little bit larger, the makeup artists tend to contour at the hairline. For this, I'm using the bronzer at the hairline, and this will give the appearance of a reduced length of a forehead. On the other hand, if the reverse were true, you have a smaller forehead that you would like to highlight, that is when we place the highlighter here and here to give the appearance of an elongated forehead. So this is what I wanted to achieve with my bronzer. And this is a little bit more detailed, but more or less what I do when I bronze on an everyday basis. Next up is blush. For this look, I'm going for a more natural or a neutral look, so I'm going to be using the Bare Minerals blush. This is the Gen Nude Powder Blush in Call My Blush. Any other neutral pink blush will do, depending on your skin tone. I'm using a fluffy natural hair brush and placing it on the top of the cheekbone. For a more lifted effect, this is where you would place the blush and blend it towards the temple. This is more from the perspective of a makeup artist because the goal is to have your face lifted. If you apply it lower than the side of your nose, it tends to drag your face a little bit down, and if you're looking for that lifted effect, this is where you place the blush. Highlighter hasn't been as popular as it used to be, but just for demonstration purposes, because highlighter can add a lot to your complexion, I'm going to be using this one. There are a lot of good highlighter formulas on the market. This one was just in a drawer closest to me. This is the Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood Glow Glide Face Architect, whatever highlighter. If you want a minimal kind of highlighter look, I would suggest using a fan brush. You go into it lightly like this, dust it, and just go on the highest point of the cheekbone and just blend it in. That is a very subtle highlight and yet natural. For clients with oily skin, this is what I recommend. Instead of using a very dewy foundation, just use a matte foundation, and at the end use a powder highlight to add glow to the points where you want there to be glow, instead of an all over dewy or greasy looking kind of glow. Highlight the bridge of your nose. This will make your nose look slimmer. Today I went in for a more subtle contoured look, but you can also define your nose with the bronzer contour combination that I applied today, which I will demonstrate, of course, in an upcoming video, so keep subscribed and keep an eye out. I am planning to do more makeup artist focused content. Apply some highlighter over here. This draws your eyes to the lips and the center of the face. And this is where you would glow naturally as well. And on top of the chin is where the light would hit you and you would get that glow. Also under the brow bone is a nice area to highlight. This again highlights under your brow bone and gives the eyebrows more of a lifted look. I would advise to highlight the bridge of the nose instead of putting a strong metallic dot on the tip of your nose, because that doesn't look the most natural. And just like I advised, if you have a smaller forehead, you would go in and highlight here above the eyebrows, here and here. But since I'm trying to do the opposite here. That's not what I usually do. So we have that natural looking highlight on the cheeks, on the nose, on the areas where light hits the face. That concludes cheek products. Let's move on to the eyes. I like to play with color when it comes to my eyes, but today I'm doing a more minimal look, more everyday look that I, as a makeup artist, would do on my clients. A good eyeshadow primer is essential to make sure that your eyeshadow lasts as long as you want it to last. So for a daily makeup look, I use the Fenty Beauty Primer. This has a transparent base, so it's not the best for color eyeshadow application, but it is good for your more everyday kind of look. Again, use minimal amounts. Again, I like to use my fingers. This is because I want to make sure there is no excess product on the eyes before I go in with my eyeshadow, which can interfere with your eyeshadow application. The first thing to note before applying eyeshadow is to use the right tools in order to have more control over your application and your blending. For example, if I use a really large blending brush, the placement of the eyeshadow will be affected, whereas if I use this brush, which is the smallest blending brush I can find, I can get a more seamless application, especially in the crease or the socket. For this application, I'm going to do a simple neutral look. Use a shade that is a couple of shades deeper than your skin tone to build a crease. I'm going to use this shade first of all to lay down a little bit of a base first. This is a bit closer to my skin tone, but just a hint more rosy. So this does make for a nice base. Now that we have just a bit of that rosy base, we can apply a little bit of a deeper shade. I would suggest to use maybe a more mid-tone shade, especially for someone with my skin tone. But the shade I have here in front of me is this one. This is a chocolate brown, and I'm going to use a very taper brush to define that eye crease. This falls under the purview of contouring. So you're creating a little bit of that contour where your crease is. This can help define the eye, especially if you have smaller eyes. You can go upwards of your actual eye socket or the crease and create the illusion of larger eyes. Make sure the color is diffused. If it's the right color, you won't need to spend a ton of time blending it, because that's not the goal for everyday makeup. When you're getting ready in the morning, you don't have enough time to do all that. For everyday, we like to keep it a little simple. Next, we highlight the lid of the eye. So we use a lighter shade like this one right here. These are, by the way, Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes. This shade is from the Nouveau palette, and the other one was from the Rose Metals. But you can find these very basic shades in essentially any drugstore or mid-range palette. I'm adding this rosy brown to add a little bit of dimension because I can't help it. I like to go a little bit overboard with my eyeshadows. It is my favorite part of the process. So I'm just creating a little bit of a halo where I'm placing that shade on the outer and the inner corners, and the cream shade just in the center. These steps are completely arbitrary. You can do what you want, but this is how I would highlight the eyes. This is for someone who has a little bit more of a wider set eye. That's why I placed the rosy brown over here and here. If you have closed set eyes, you would either put a matte white here or shimmer to make them appear a little bit more wider. This is, of course, something I'm going to do a separate video on because I don't see this discussed enough, and I think it's a very important point because eyes are arguably the most important feature of your face. And I see a lot of people putting shimmers, light colored ones, or matte whites in their inner corners when it doesn't make sense. But this is how I like to do mine. This is where I like to place color so that the eyes don't appear as wide set. Of course, it's nice to add a little shimmer on top, which I will be doing. From a makeup artist's point of view, this is just an additional step. It doesn't need to be followed, but I prefer a shimmer over a completely matte eye. So I'm going to choose a color that matches my top here just a little bit, but will look slightly more natural than something a little bit more, say, colorful. These palettes have such high impact shimmers that I am reconsidering. Let's put this green to match my top. I think I will sheer it out a little though. I'm going to put just a little bit of it in the center and blend it slightly. I like to use my shimmers with a finger. That gives the most payoff, but right now I'm also trying to control the amount of color I place there because I want it to be subtle. And that is the middle ground that I wanted to achieve. Let's do eyeliner. Using a Valentino eyeliner, but there are tons of good ones on the market. So as a makeup artist for everyday, this is what I would do. Just keep it close to the lash line and stop soon as the lash line finishes, because there are no extra wings, there are no winged liners. That is high fashion, high makeup kind of thing. That was a trend actually. But I'm trying to demonstrate how a makeup artist would make a person look a little bit more natural on an everyday basis, and this is how you do it. In this way, your lash line looks accentuated and it doesn't look like you're wearing liner. Next up is mascara. I use the Tarte Manager mascara or the Pat McGrath Labs Dark Star mascara. Either one of those are good, but there are many good drugstore mascaras on the market. If you want a very bold lash look, you build up the mascara. So first one layer, wiggle it at the base, and then go for another layer. The key is to not go in too many times, because if it gets too liquidy, avoid those kind of mascaras in the first place. But if it gets too liquidy, then it will smear on your lid or the brow bone, and it will just take time to remove it. Time which in this scenario we don't have a lot of. I think these lashes are sufficient for the look I'm going for, because false lashes will not fall into the natural category. I will also use just the slightest bit of mascara on the lower lashes. Not too much, because again it can smudge into your under eye concealer, but just enough so that they give you that definition under the eye. Lastly, if you want your eyes to be a little bit more brighter, more open, if you have smaller eyes, for example, you can use an eye pencil like this one. This is in the shade Apricot Cream, and this is from Melt Cosmetics, but I'm sure ColourPop also has some cream gel liners which are excellent quality. This gives your eyes some brightness without being white, because white can look unnatural. So this is what I would pick. Personally, I wouldn't wear this on an everyday basis because my eyes are already quite large. So I wouldn't do this necessarily for me, but for someone who really wants to highlight their eyes, I think this would be nice. I wanted to demonstrate it anyway. For me and my features, I think I would prefer more of a black waterline, which I am doing right now. I prefer this because it gives more of a smoky effect, which I like when it comes to my eyes. I won't go in all the way because I still want my eyes to be a little bit more open in the center, but towards the side It gives it a more smoky, sultry effect. Now for the lips. This is the lip oil from Fenty, and I actually like them this way as well. It looks very natural, very fresh, but I also want to demonstrate a lipstick application. So the first step is always lip liner. This gives a very defined application, which is hard to achieve with applying a lipstick directly. Usually I don't do lip liner that often, but as a makeup artist, this is the step that really makes a difference. Start by defining the Cupid's bow. Some people don't like to define it, but I actually prefer this. If you have one, you can also slightly overline the lips because that will make them look fuller, but if you go too much beyond the actual lip line, it will look a little unnatural. So when overlining, keep in contact with the actual lip line, which will serve as a guide. This is a lighter colored lip liner, but when using a deeper color, make sure to fill in the lips of that color as well, because if your lipstick fades during the day, you're just left with that awkward outline, unless that is the look you're going for. I'm filling in my lips slightly in case that happens. And now I can apply the actual lipstick. For this application, I want to use a nude rose pink kind of color. For natural application, I recommend using a lip color that is just slightly deeper than your actual lip color. You don't want concealer lips, but then you also don't want it to be too dark. This color here is a little bit too pinky to be my perfect shade, but these kind of pinky colors tend to give a more youthful, fresher look. Make sure to check for any transfer on the teeth, and make sure to check the corners. These are usually areas where lipsticks tend to smudge, so just be a bit more mindful around these areas. If you want to clean up your lipstick from areas that might be smudging a little bit, the best trick is to use a little bit of a concealer on a flat definer brush and just place it on the outline. This gives even more of a defined lip than if you just use a lip pencil. The lip color is just a little bit more pigmented than I would want it to be, so I'm going to blot it on a tissue. As you can see, there is much less shine now and much less color. I think I prefer this application more. I think we're all but done. This is how the look turned out. This is how we're looking. I had so much fun creating this. It's been a while since I did my makeup in a more minimal way like this. And I must admit, it does look flattering. I want to create more videos demonstrating different makeup artist techniques that I have in my tool belt, especially some of the things that I touched on in this video. And I hope this was useful to you in terms of techniques and the colors to create your own everyday makeup looks. Subscribe if you enjoy content like this, and I will see you in my next one.